I call this meeting to order. Welcome to the meeting number 31 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Finances. The committee is meeting today from 4:42 Ottawa time, and to hear from the President of the Treasury Board and officials the main estimates and department plans for 2021-2022. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Interpretation in this video conference will work very much like the regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen to either use the floor, English, or French. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, you may click on your microphone icon to activate your mic. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. To raise a point of order during the meeting, committee members should ensure their microphone is unmuted and say point of order to get the chair's attention. The clerk and the analysts are participating in the meeting virtually today. So if you need to speak with them during the meeting, please email them through the committee email address. The clerk may also be reached by using his cell phone number. For those people who are participating in the committee room, please note that masks are required unless seated and when physical distancing is not possible. And with that said, I will now invite the President of the Treasury Board to make his opening statements. Mr. Duclos.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Kitchen. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank the committee for talking about to talk about main estimates and the Treasury Board Secretariat to plan for 2021-2022. I'm joined today by some officials from my department. We have Glenn Purves, Assistant Secretary, Expenditure Management Sector. Roger Ermith, Assistant Controller General, Financial Management Sector. Karen Cahill, Assistant Secretary and Chief Financial Officer of the Treasury Board Secretariat. Sonia Reid, Acting Assistant Secretary, Digital and Services Policy, and Tolga Yelkin, Assistant Deputy Minister, Workplace Policies and Services.
2022 main estimates seek funding for the continuation of previously approved programs and services, as well as investments to support Canadians through the COVID-19 pandemic and to establish essential conditions for successful economic recovery. These investments include economic support to Canadian citizens and businesses, vaccine funding, expanded support for pandemic-related mental health tools, virtual care, and many others. The main estimates provide information on $342.2 billion in proposed spending for 123 organizations. This can be further broken down into $141.9 billion in voted expenditures and $200.3 billion in statutory expenditures already authorized through existing legislation. In total, that means $22.7 billion is related to the COVID-19 pandemic response. This includes just over $10 billion for the Canadian Recovery Benefit, the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, and the Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit. Mr. Chair, I would like to point out some significant changes in statutory spending from last year's main estimates. These include payments to individuals under the Canada Recovery Benefits Act, which I just mentioned. Other changes of note are updates to major transfer payments, notably elderly benefits and the Canada Health Transfer, and increased climate action incentive payments published in the Fall Economic Statement 2020. The main estimates exclude certain items listed in the Fall Economic Statement 2020, which do not require annual parliamentary approval, such as the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and employment insurance. En ce qui concerne mon propre ministère,
with respect to my own department, the Treasury Board Secretariat, expenditures identified in these main estimates include $3.7 billion for items such as government contingencies, government-wide initiatives, compensation requirements, operating and capital budget carry forward, and pay list expenditures. For the Treasury Board Secretariat, the remaining expenditures will serve to continue to strengthen the clarity and consistency of financial and performance reporting and support the government's pandemic response. There is also just over $3 billion for responsibilities as the employers. These expenditures will serve to make payments under the public service, pension, benefit, and insurance plans, including the employer's share of health, income maintenance, and life insurance premiums. Departmentally, expenditures will also serve to help prepare the public service for the future, support diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, and ensure compliance with the official languages. Funds will also be used to negotiate with public sector unions and lead the implementation of the Pay Equity Act. These activities are further detailed in the Treasury Board Secretariat's departmental plan, which I understand the committee has expressed interest in.
Play a fundamental role in the expenditure cycle by outlining and describing organizational priorities linked to the funding sought through the main estimates. The departmental plans set out the objectives and expected results for departments and how they will achieve these results throughout the year. In the case of the Treasury Board Secretariat, I would like to highlight a few of these commitments. For 2021-2022, the Secretariat will support the government's COVID-19 pandemic response by providing additional guidance to departments for implementing policies, programs, and initiatives related to the response. In collaboration with Finance Canada, the Secretariat will also track the impact of the government's fiscal response to inform and support decision-making and investments going forward. Other important objectives include reducing greenhouse gas emissions from federal operations and recruiting people to the public service from communities across Canada. En outre, le Secrétariat soutient.
The Secretariat is also actively supporting a healthy, safe, and inclusive work environment and accelerating the government's efforts to achieve a public service that is representative of the Canadian population it serves. My department is also committed to regulatory reform efforts to assist Canadian businesses in being more competitive, improving transparency, reducing administrative burden, and harmonizing regulations. These reforms will be undertaken while ensuring the protection of the environment and the health, safety, and security of Canadians.
Share the priorities set out in the Secretariat's departmental plan, and the investments requested in the main estimates reflect the priorities of our government and of Canadians. We continue to also prioritize the way these estimates are presented with extensive explanatory documentation readily accessible to parliamentarians and Canadians alike online. In closing, thank you again for your kind invitation to speak with you today. My officials and I would be delighted to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate your comments. And we will now go into our first round of questioning, and we will start with Mr. Paul Hughes for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, Mr. Minister. Mr. Duclos, as an economist and the president of the Treasury Board, I'd like to show you a document. I don't know if you can see it, but you see Figure 1, which is in the main estimates 2021-22, and you have a green section here, which is servicing the debt, which is $20 billion. Is that something that worries you? I'm sorry, your microphone is muted. Yes, I'm sorry. I thought I'd started well, but well, thank you for a dear colleague from the committee. But I'm also, of course, as president of the Treasury Board, and I have the responsibility of ensuring that the funds and the energy of the Canadian government are used where it's important in the pandemic context. As an economist, we can also say that an alternative to not investing quickly in the pandemic response to businesses and to Canadians, it would have been terrible. We would have had a crisis, not only an extraordinary economic crisis. I'm sorry, Mr. Duclos, I don't have much time, but I'm just asking if you're worried. If there's an increase of interest rates, are you worried about the impact it would have on Canada's finances? Well, it's with respect to the interest, with respect to the GDP, it's the lowest ratio, and we're amongst one of the best in terms of the financial situation for the G7 countries when we look at. So we have. So your answer is that you're not worried if there's an increase in the interest rates in terms of impact in the medium term, and as the parliamentary secretary to the budget main estimates has said, it will have an effect on taxpayers even if there's just a 1% increase in the interest rate. Well, this is a answer. This is a concern. We have to get out of this crisis in solid terms, and we want to avoid having a higher deficit, but that it would last for an even longer period, which would mean that we would be in a terrible economic situation. So that would mean that you shouldn't, you want to avoid expenses that aren't necessary to get out of the pandemic. We can see that the department thinks that you need 1.8 million for extra employees. I'd like to know, with respect to those funds for new people, for extra people or extra hours, why don't you have for correctional services people, why don't you have a bonus for people that have to work? Why can't they get a bonus when they don't get, and they haven't had any bonus? Can you answer that? Well, two things. First of all, I think you'd need to be more specific with respect to which aspect of the budget you're thinking about. You're asking $1.8 billion for, and I'm asking why. Our Correctional Services Office, that you've met with their union, they've asked the question, but why wouldn't they not be able to have a danger bonus because they have to serve during the pandemic? Well, you have the Canadian Forces that have gone into the long-term care homes. They did get a bonus before service in a time of danger. So why wouldn't the Correctional Services employees have that same right? Well, if you want to get more information on the $1.8 billion in human resources it's very legitimate during the pandemic time. So I think you should ask Kaya Atkin, who would be able to give you more information. I'd like to know, for correctional services officers, would there be any way of these people getting extra funds? There's $1.8 billion, yes, and then you're also talking about correctional services officers. I have met with, and Minister Blair also has met with this sector, because the work that they do is very important and it's difficult during the pandemic. Can you do something for them and not, Mr. Minister? Time is running out here. Well, Minister Blair, I think, would be very pleased. He had more direct exchanges than me. So with the representative of the Correctional Services people, he'll be able to speak to you more to that. My next question. For anticipated payments, when the government makes advance payments, they're accepting to have a greater risk, and you have this written into the guide. And with these anticipated payments, have you warned the departments that there may be some risk here? Yes. In pandemic times, as you said, we had to be very quick and efficient in our response. And so that means that at times we had to work more quickly with agility. For example, it could have taken months and maybe even years to pay for the workers. So that we know that there's hundreds of millions of dollars that we heard about last week where there was $81 million in payments that were made for equipments coming from China, could have been from elsewhere also, and this wasn't acceptable. So in terms of anticipated payments and control measures, what exactly has happened where so you have companies that don't necessarily have medical expertise and they're getting that much money without proving that the goods bought by the Canadian government were acceptable. Well, this is an excellent remark. In the context, we're in a context where we have to act quickly, and so we have to set up mechanisms to ensure that investments are made. Well, what happened last year? There wasn't any control.
We'll now go to Mr. Drouin for 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I believe I'll be filling in for Mr. Drouin.
Okay, we'll go to Mr. Kazmierczak.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Thank you very much. And Minister Duclos, it is, I think I speak on behalf of the entire committee. We're delighted to see you back at OGGO, and we're delighted to see you back in full strength as well. So wonderful to see you again. The TBS 2021-22 TBS departmental plan states that access to reliable disaggregated data is essential for understanding the experiences of employees in designated employment equity groups and of those in other employment equity seeking groups, and for identifying gaps in representation. We know that diversity is incredibly important in our workforce and in the federal government and in this ministry. Could you provide an update on how TBS is generating and publishing disaggregated data?
Well, thank you very much, Jirek, and thank you for your kind remark on my inability a couple of times, unfortunately, in the last few months to be fully in touch with you and to be fully supportive of your important work. Now, thank you also for your very relevant question on diversity and inclusion. In Canada, we're very proud of diversity in many different dimensions, but for that diversity to be meaningful, it has to come with inclusion. And the Secretariat of the Treasury Board has a key role to play when it comes to making our public service fully inclusive. And that comes, as you said, with the ability to generate and then to share disaggregated data. To date, there have been 7 sets of disaggregated data released to the public and to the public service, which in fact provide the first ever views into the composition of 21 different employment equity subgroups. I repeat, the first ever views on the disaggregated picture of our public service. These numbers on those are based on those who have chosen to self-identify. We have a lot more work to do because self-identification is sometimes an issue when it comes to sharing one's diversity and one's personality, one's person, one's identity. So we have work to do, but the good news is that the Secretary of the Treasury Board and Tolga might want to add briefly something on that, is working very well with negotiating agents, with various representatives and leaders of our diversity and the public service, and we are looking forward to more work and outcomes to be produced. But Tolga, maybe briefly, you might want to share further news on that.
Yes, Minister, thank you. So I would just add as well, too, you mentioned the importance of self-identification. Our data is really only as good as the degree to which individuals feel safe and comfortable self-identifying with one of the equity-seeking groups. And so we are currently working within Treasury Board Secretariat to develop an approach which will be more inclusive in terms of the way in which it seeks that data from public servants, allowing them to, in effect, more completely and more accurately express their identity, and to demystify and to share with them information on the reasons for which that data is disclosed and how it can benefit them. So we're really looking forward to, I think, the richness that adds to the data that we're actually able to collect.
Terrific. I really appreciate just seeing the tremendous progress that's being made and the careful attention that's being brought to disaggregated data. So I really do appreciate both those responses. We know that data is just one piece of the puzzle. Obviously, you need data to be able to action on it, but you also need to take action in order to increase diversification in the ranks. And so We know that there are still gaps in the diversity of executives in the public service, as highlighted in the TBS departmental plan. What actions has TBS taken, Minister, to increase the diversity of senior leadership in our public service?
Well, thank you again, Eric, for being both sensitive and interested and focused so much on that. Yes, as you said, segregated data matter. We have also fixed targets when it comes to enhancing the diversity of our public service. As you may have noted in the Budget Implementation Act, we have also introduced changes to the Public Service Employment Act, which will reduce barriers to not only barriers to entry, but most certainly barriers to fulfillment of one's abilities in the public service and promotion and feelings of well-being and fulfillment. We, as you know, we're also going to invest, and we have invested significantly in education and awareness opportunities, learning events. We are going to update the training with the Canadian Public School of Public Service. We are going to set up a new federal speakers bureau on diversity and inclusion and on senior leadership. We are going to review the appointment mechanisms. We're going to work on what may sometimes be useful external recruitment strategies. We're setting up mentorship plus activities to promote and support those that want to go further in their careers, and also implement a leadership development program. So it's all work in progress. There is always more to do, but as you said, Eric, we can all obviously celebrate the progress that we've made until now.
Thank you, Minister. Fantastic response. Mr. Chair, do we have any more time?
You have 15 seconds.
I will yield those 15 seconds and simply say, go Leafs, go.
Thank you. And we'll now go to Ms. Vignola for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Duclos, for being here. A couple of words of compliments. And how can you explain where we're at for helping out people that have been in trouble with the Phoenix system? Well, thank you for the question. As we've often said, but we need to repeat it. It's totally unacceptable that employees from the public service would not be correctly paid and on time for the services they render, not just for the public service, but for Canadians. And so this is something that has been recognized, and we're working very hard, and we're working with negotiating agents to come up with agreements and those agreements are now being set up so that there will be appropriate compensation for the unacceptable damages financially, but also for the stress. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to be a little bit more precise for a few words. There have been hundreds of emails coming to my office and probably to yours also about the fact that it would be the Treasury Board Secretariat that is not giving a CRA the necessary directives to be able to go ahead with those payments for the employees. Monday, Mr. Haywood, who was the union president, said that there was an agreement between the Treasury Board Secretariat and the CRA, but that the letter was not signed by the Treasury Board Secretariat. So what's stopping the Treasury Board Secretary from signing so that these employees can get the funds that they are expected to get? Well, thank you. Your question is going to allow me to be a little bit more precise in my answer. Well, the agreements that I mentioned, those were signed, but those are being set up. And so the agreement, it's a Section 18, and that is specifically indicated there that there will be payments that will be made. And so the Canada Revenue Agency is to establish just how those payments will be applied, and they have established that some of that compensation should be taxable, and so I think that I don't really have any influence over what they do at the Canada Revenue Agency. Question, well, I think that something needs to be done because Canada Revenue Agency says they're waiting for something from you, and you're saying that you can't be involved because they're the ones that are to determine things. Well, I think somebody has to get things straight somewhere, because you said it was unacceptable what people went through and what they're continuing to go through, and I've never seen that there was any kind of damages that would be taxable. So there were victims of Phoenix, and some people that went into retirement, and there were still problems for them also. And there were some people that still haven't been paid any damages. When will that be sent to them? Excellent question. And of course, these payments will be sent out as quickly as possible. That would be the best. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer because we want to ensure that they're sent out at the right amounts and that the people get the amounts that they have a right to. And I think maybe Karen would be able to give you a detailed answer. Karen, are you the one that would be able to give some more information? Yes, I can. Thank you. People, former public servants that were in the 2019 agreement, they've already started receiving damages. So for former employees, with the 2020 agreement for retirees, the period where those payments will be made for damages, that will be in the fall of 2021. However, they can put in a request for expenses that they would have had following problems with the Phoenix pay system. And this is the case, and that's always been in effect. So those members, I just wanted to let you know that they will be getting more communication in the weeks coming up. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're asking $3 billion for insurance. This is more than 40% with respect to the 2021 budget. So how do you explain that increase, for one? And secondly, in the extra supplementary budget, are there anything else that has to do with public service insurance? Great question. It's a little bit more complicated. I think that Karen, if she would please answer. Absolutely. Well, yes, there is another 40.4%, and that is explained in two ways. First of all, there's $795,000 and that request was in the supplementary estimates, and that was for 2020 and 2021. So that continues, and there's also a $78 million increase for the long-term leave from the public service, and this was in the supplementary budget A for 2021. So now it has been included as an expense in our budget, and right now I can't make any promises, but we don't have anything for the supplementary budgets upcoming. Thank you.
I'll go to Mr. Green for 6 minutes.
Thank you. And I would also like to welcome back my good friend, Minister Duclos. Happy to see you here before us, looking well and healthy and ready to hopefully take on this work ahead. In your opening remarks, you mentioned efforts that were related to pay equity and the implementation of the Pay Equity Act. And according to your 2021 and 22 departmental plan, that you were talking about working with departments and agencies to ensure compliance with the official languages legislation and lead to the implementation of the Pay Equity Act in the core public administration and the RCMP. So which departments and agencies are struggling most to comply with the official languages legislation?
Thank you, Matthew, and I'm not only glad to see you again, but also glad to hear you ask questions on official languages. It's, as you might expect, um, it's a key issue and a key interest for me at the Treasury Board. We're working every day to make sure that everyone in the public service, who whatever official language this person may want to use, is able to do so and to prosper in the public service, giving his or her full potential. Now, the Secretariat has a key role to play, and one of this role is to make sure that the directive on the use of official languages is well understood by departments. Now, if you would like to ask specific questions to specific departments, that's obviously.
I do have a specific question through you, Mr. Chair, and it relates to actually the ongoing operations of Parliament. And I'm wondering what the Treasury Board has done, understanding that there have been frequent interruptions in our ability to have adequate standards and translation for our committees. It's often the case that sometimes our democratic processes are capped at committee because we don't have the right kind of hybrid technology or perhaps maybe the staffing in place to allow the fullness of debates and discussions, and sometimes, government or opposition filibusters. And so I'm wondering, notwithstanding the fact that we're going to be looking at perhaps for the foreseeable future, this kind of hybrid model, what steps has the Treasury Board taken to ensure that we have adequate support to comply with the Official Languages Act as it relates to our own operations as parliamentarians?
Well, thank you, Matthew. And as parliamentarians, you and we not only have a right, but we have a duty to ask for, as you said, for our ability to operate in either of the official languages. So if you and any other colleagues on the committee see areas in which things have to be improved, then we need to speak out and let those things know to the relevant people either within the committee, and there are good and great people that I see on the screen. The clerk is certainly one of them. And there are many others outside of this particular committee that should be there to support this obviously important.
Mr. Chair, I have a deep amount of respect for my friend, the Minister Duclos, but I also have limited time, and he has an ability to really stretch. And so I'm going to just bring it back to my line of questioning, if I could, and I want to shift gears a little bit about the expectation for the full implementation of the Pay Equity Act. As the minister will know, the president of Treasury Board will know that there is a significant Black class action lawsuit that identifies as a particular point of interest in negotiation the ability for self-declaration and a call for the federal government to amend the self-declaration of visible minority to create a separate category for Black employees. And I know in his previous remarks with my good friend, Mr. Kazmierczuk, he talked about disaggregated data. So for the interest of, good faith conversation around the issue, my question is, understanding that this request is coming from the Black class action, has the Treasury Board looked at and then preliminary steps towards the ability for desegregated categories as it relates to not just Black employees, but all employees, to be able to ensure that there's an accurate reflection of perhaps some of the barriers or challenges that are faced by the public sector workforce?
Thank you, Matthew. So you're asking three different things. The first one about the Wage Equity Act, which was passed in the earlier mandate. Unfortunately, you were not there yet, but you're always obviously aware that this law was given royal assent in December 2018, and we look forward to implementing this in the fall 2020. Just a few months ago, a set of proposed regulations were published so that up to 1.3 million Canadians could, at some point when these regulations are approved, benefit from proactive wage equity opportunities. The second thing is about the Employment Equity Act. I'm supporting my colleague, Minister Tassi, in reviewing that act for the purposes that you have highlighted. And the third thing is about the class actions and the importance of recognizing that there have been barriers over the past in people fulfilling their full potential. Now I'll turn quickly to Tolga Yarkin so that he can perhaps outline where we are at this particular stage?
Yes, thank you, Minister. So just I very briefly, just some elaborations on your remarks. When it comes to the Employment Equity Act review, certainly we are supporting our colleagues at Labour Canada, but we're also, in a sense, not waiting for any changes to the Employment Equity Act, both to, as we've already discussed here, release disaggregated data, but also offer opportunities for public servants to self-identify at the subgroup level. And when it comes to the work that is ongoing in the context of Thompson and Diallo and the class action, certainly as the minister has identified, we are aware and conscious that there are issues and opportunities and challenges when it comes to racism and discrimination in all organizations, including ours. And so we're approaching the exploratory discussions with Plaintiffs' Counsel in that spirit, and it's very early days yet, but we look forward to continuing this discussion with them.
Thank you, Mr. Yalkin. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll now go to Mr. Macaulay for 5 minutes.
Come back. It is nice to see you. Well, Minister, did the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, did that go through the standard Treasury Board approval process?
Thank you, and thank you for your kind words. Yes, I was looking forward to be back, and in particular to exchange with you, Kelly. And now on the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidies, as you will remember, that was voted in Parliament.
Yeah,
so
no, I recognize that. Did it go through the standard Treasury Board approval process?
Well, maybe I should turn at some point to Glenn Purves, who will be happy to distinguish between voted and statutory expenditures that might be useful to the members of the committee.
Right, but as a new spending program under Financial Administration Act, my understanding is that the wage subsidy program would have had to go through the standard Treasury Board approval process. The reason, of course, I'm asking is we've all seen the reports. It's the largest of the COVID spending, $100 billion, and we've seen the reports recently, obviously, of wealthy hedge funds receiving the money, profitable companies receiving taxpayers' money. So I'm asking, did it go through the proper or the usual Treasury Board approval process?
Well, you're right in saying that this was an extremely important part of our pandemic response to the economic crisis. It helped, if I remember well, over 5 million.
Minister, I'm aware of the program, but please, could you answer the question? Did it go through the regular, proper Treasury Board approval process? It's $100 billion. Did it go through the process? Did you approve it? And, what do you think of the news that money is going to wealthy hedge funds and profitable companies? Taxpayers' money is just seems going out the door without proper oversight.
That's very good. So there are two parts to your question. The first one is the impact of that program. And I would be happy, as you might have noted, to speak about the incredibly important and positive impact.
That's a very simple question. Did it go through this $100 billion program? Did it go through the usual the standard Treasury Board approval process? And were there any exemptions granted from policy for this $100 billion?
So that was the first part of my answer. So if you are interested, and I would be certainly very interested in talking
I'd be interested in the answer.
But the second part of the question is about the distinction between voted and statutory expenditures. These are called statutory expenditures, and I would turn to Glenn Purves to make sure that every member of the committee understands the difference between the two.
Okay. Question then, did it go through the process? Were there any exemptions granted on this?
So Glenn, I don't see you on the screen, but I think you would be there.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you really well.
Yeah. Yes. So I don't have the answer to that question.
Okay. Let me just stop you both right here. It's $100 billion of taxpayers' money. Billions have gone to hedge funds. Billions have gone to profitable companies. One of them their market cap has gone up $9 billion since COVID started. And you're saying neither one of you have an answer whether this $100 billion went through the standard Treasury Board approval process. and whether this money, whether any of this was granted exemptions going through the process. Do you understand my concern?
Under statutory authorities, so again, Minister Duclos is correct in the sense that there are appropriations that go for spending authority, and then there are statutory authorities that have various authorities built into the legislation. So I'm not saying that if there was any step that involved the Treasury Board, certainly the authorities would have been secured before any money flowed. But I'm just saying that it's
$100 billion. Who's reviewing this money if TPS is not doing it? Like, I'm going to quote TPS's reason of being: provides oversight of government financial management spending. From the FAA 7.11 lays out administration policy and oversight of expenditures. And we've got $100 billion going out, and we can't get a simple answer of whether this went through Treasury Board approval process and were any exemptions granted. Let me ask you, were there exemptions granted for any of the other COVID spending from standard Treasury Board approval process?
Mr. Purves is explaining to us and to you the distinction between expenditures voted and legislated in the House of Commons, and we're all members of Parliament. So through our role as members of Parliament, we had not only the opportunity but the responsibility to express our views on whether these expenditures were.
Do you think it's appropriate that taxpayers' money went to wealthy hedge funds?
And if I remember well, we all voted in favor of that legislation.
Wow.
Thank you, Minister.
2020.
Thank you, Minister. And if the Minister and Mr. Purves can provide further answers to the committee, it would be appreciated to be provided to the clerk. Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. McKinnon for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et bienvenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the President of the Treasury Board. We're very pleased to see you again. I just would like to briefly, before going on to another subject, I'd come back to something that was brought up by Madame Vignola, and this has to do with damages and payments for damages for the Phoenix issues. I just want to be clear, the Treasury Board has not taken any position either for or against, or they actually don't have anything to do with choosing or not to have any damages be paid out for the Phoenix problems. So thank you for your question. Well, there's two questions, one for the agency and one for the Treasury Board Secretary. We have two responsibilities. One is to negotiate an agreement with a negotiating agent, and also to be able to put this agreement out, the content of it out. And you have the Section 18 is public now for since a few weeks ago. And then there's issues that related to the Canadian Revenue Agency, and they will be decided on what type of payments will be made and what type of compensation will be able to be made based on the negotiated agreement between the negotiating agents and the TBS. And so those decisions are made independently of. The Secretariat does negotiates agreement, and that agreement then is used by the Canada Revenue Agency for them to be able to be as transparent and as professional as possible to be able to decide on how that compensation should be paid. Well, thank you. That's very clear. I would now like to turn, as you know, I am MP for the National Capital Region, just as Mr. Drouin is, and we are often asked with respect to when public servants will be able to go back to work, and they're wondering how they will be able to organize their lives and how they will be able to foresee the future and how the pandemic will come to an end. So could you describe in terms so that those who are listening will be able to understand clearly what factors will you be looking at, analyzing, and including in your deliberations at the Treasury Board Secretariat as an employer in order to decide on what stages will be taken for coming back to work? Answer. Well, thank you, Stephen. And you know, to be in a riding where there are a lot of public servants, you're in Ottawa and I'm in Quebec. I'm in Gatineau. Yes, so sorry. I should know because I also live part-time in Gatineau. So yes, we have the opportunity to serve and live with people who put a lot of their lives, their time into public service. So there are three main things. There's health, second, flexibility, and third, collaboration. Because health and security of the employees is the main concern of the employer, and according to, pursuant to the law, we have to put that as a first priority. So we need to take into consideration all of the different types of employees with different responsibilities working in different areas. And sometimes they're in areas where the pandemic may have had different impacts as to and different risks for their health. So we need to look into that. And then we have to also look at the third point, collaboration. And as MP and as president of the Treasury Board, we have to work closely with public servants and their representatives. And we've been doing it since the beginning of the pandemic. And so since the very beginning, we've been working to ensure that working conditions and living conditions for people living in Gatineau and Quebec are doing well. Question. So we have heard that you will be delegating to deputy ministers of departments and agencies. You will be delegating to them the authority to make decisions as to when people will be able to come back to work within their different their respective departments and agencies. So why do you feel that you should have such a decentralized approach? Answer. Well, that's a very good question. And I think people would understand clearly. It, of course, depends on the working conditions and the living conditions for these public servants. Canada is a huge country. People are serving Canadian government all across the Canadian provinces and territories. And so conditions to return to work, they have to be safe. And of course, the fact that the pandemic was very difficult and traumatizing, we've learned some lessons and as to how we can do better following the pandemic.
I will now go to Ms. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Duclos, in your departmental plan, I'd like to come back to what you were asked earlier. You were saying that you'll be working with all of the ministers and the different agencies so that official languages Act is respected. So I'd like to know, when will this be starting? Just this week, just yesterday, in fact, I received an invitation from a minister for an information section. It was in English, no translation. And I received others also from the Minister of Finance to speak about the budget, and this was without any translation, only in English. So I think not only citizens would have the right to have access to information in both languages, but I would imagine MPs also would have that possibility. So when is this going to be moving ahead so that this is actually done in French would be given the consideration it deserves? Thank you, Madame Vignola, for this question. Well, there would be so much to say on that issue, and I know that we don't have enough time, but so just to tell you about everything we're doing since 2015 to increase the presence of bilingualism all across the country and within the public service, the Ontario French University. And there's plans for official languages. This is the most largest plan, and there's work that is done for the census, which I hope everybody has filled it out, and also you have judicial documents, things that were abolished by the Conservatives. So we have done a lot, and we will continue to do the work over the next few weeks. We want to reinforce the criteria for nominations, appointments for positions. But I know you're impatient because you want to know how you, as a Francophone, and even myself as a Francophone, and this is even within your committee, and sometimes things aren't up to the expectations that we would have as parliamentarian and as a public service for bilingualism. I think we just simply need to insist and to ask that the corrections be made.
Minister. We'll now go to Mr. Green for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We know that the Minister of Finance presented her budget on April 19th. When will the supplementary estimates A for 2021 and 22 be tabled?
They will be tabled very soon, Matthew.
And what date would look like very soon? Do we have a month? Do we know? Are we talking a few weeks?
Well, as you might expect, I won't give you a precise date, but I can tell you it will be as soon as possible. Now, if you'd like to have further details, I can turn to Mr.
No, that's quite fine. You're quite capable. I would like to ask now what portion of the budget measures announced by the Minister of Finance on April 19th will be included in these estimates, and specifically, have they included childcare?
Now, as you know, I have a great level of esteem and even affection for you, Matthew. Unfortunately, I cannot provide these details at this time, but I'd be happy to come back as quickly as I can for either myself or officials to provide further guidance on that important question.
And so, just forgive me. What's stopping you exactly from giving us a basic estimate on when we might be looking to see that? I mean, we waited 2 years, right, for the budget.
Are you thinking about the date or the content of the estimate?
Well, let's go back to the timing. Like, when can Canadians expect to get a clear picture for where we're headed based on the budget that was presented on April 19th?
Well, we already have quite a lot of information. You would have read the 820-page budget and would have probably kept in mind most of it. You also have heard debates in the House. You would have read the Budget Implementation Act. So all of this is very substantial and very full.
I noticed on that point, through you, Mr. Chair, I noticed within the budget there wasn't a lot about the settlement for land claims. Do you have any idea about how much the government is setting aside to settle existing land claims? And I'll bring to your attention the ongoing reclamation that is happening at 1492 Landback.
Well, this is a very good question. As you will know, it's a reconciliation and affirmation and respect for Indigenous peoples has been at the center of our actions and attitudes since 2015. It's an ongoing work. I'm sure you will want to invite and to listen to and to talk to my colleagues, Minister Bennett and Minister Miller. They would be, I think, not only happy to talk to you, but also to hear from you on how we can make that work, important work, advance even further.
Thank you, Minister. And Mr. Green will now go to Ms. Harder for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being with us today. You talked about reinforcing your priorities in your opening remarks. I'm just wondering, are you familiar with your departmental plan?
Yes, of course, I'm familiar with the department plan, and I know that you will have read it completely and most likely not only understood, but appreciated most of it.
Sure. One of the things that was talked about earlier between you and one of the Liberal members at the table was just the importance of diversity. The statement was made by you that diversity is incredibly important, and I can appreciate that. What's interesting to me is that when I look at the department plan, the goals that are set out in terms of the number of people within the executive, so executive employees, who are also a member of a visible minority, the goal is actually not to increase the number of those individuals, but actually to decrease the number of those individuals. I find that interesting and actually quite concerning, given the state of our country and where I think most people would like to go. And then also given the statement that you made earlier with regards to placing incredible importance on diversity. So the percentage right now of those individuals who are members of a visible minority is 11.5%. But the goal that you've set out, the target that you've set out, is 10.6%. So that's actually an 8% drop. So your goal is actually to reduce the number of visible minorities within your executive. Why?
Thank you, Ms. Arder, Rachel. Well, I'm glad to be speaking about this. Let me say two things briefly. First, about the data. As you would have seen, now we are proud and pleased to be able to provide further disaggregated data. I spoke earlier, as you might have heard, about
I'm not asking about disaggregated data. I'm asking why your goal is actually to decrease the number of individuals who are of visible minority.
So first the numbers, and then second the targets and the achievements. So the numbers, as you also said, matter, because if we want to make further progress, we need to know what's the current situation. So these numbers, the 7 sets of disaggregated data that I mentioned earlier.
So sorry, why are you wanting to decrease the percentage of individuals who are within your executive who are also a member of a visible minority?
So as I'm trying to say, the numbers matter very much.
I don't actually need to be mansplained to. I understand the data. I have the chart in front of me. I actually just need you to answer the question.
And second, the targets. And we're very pleased that
But yet you continue to mansplain? Why?
Well, and then the targets, and we are very pleased that you and I can see that sometimes we even exceed those targets. So exceeding targets is in most cases a good thing, and we are going to continue.
Totally, I agree with that. I think exceeding the targets is a good thing. It is a good thing, which is why I'm confused. I'm actually baffled as to why this is something that your department has done year over year. So this isn't just a one-off. It's in this departmental plan, but it was actually in the last departmental plan as well, where your goal was actually to decrease the percentage of people who are a visible minority and who are a part of your executive team. So this isn't just a one-off. This isn't just a glitch.
I think you're right, Rachel.
Shouldn't you want to get better? If you're committed to diversity, shouldn't you be setting your targets above where you're at rather than setting your targets below where you're currently at?
The key word here is right. I think you're right to ask for clarity, and I would therefore turn to probably Tolga, who was going to explain perhaps in some more details what exactly the departmental plan says.
Sure, Minister, if I may, because maybe he can explain both of these things at the same time. In your departmental plan, you've actually outlined the same type of priority for women. So again, the current rate is 51.1%, but your target for this coming year is 48%. So you're actually aiming for a 6% drop in the number of women that are employed within your department. So
there
that doesn't speak of diversity if you're looking to get rid of those who are of minority, part of a visible minority group, and women.
So are you hoping for clarity and less confusion? If so, I can turn to Tolga. Tolga will be pleased to clarify and make these things less confusing for you.
I'm just wondering, Minister, why you're not setting your targets higher rather than lower than where things are currently at.
Would you like an answer?
I was hoping you as the minister might be able to provide direction. I believe it's your department.
So would you like an answer?
I'm waiting.
Okay, Tolga.
Yes, thank you, Minister.
So the minister doesn't know.
No, it's the number that Chair, the number that appears as the benchmark in the departmental plan is indeed that of benchmark. It's a floor. It's not necessarily a ceiling.
And it actually this is just it, why would your floor be less than where you're at right now?
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Can we keep a conversation going? It's extremely difficult for interpreters.
Thank you. And with that said, that if Mr. Yalkin has an answer, if he could provide that to the committee in writing, it would be greatly appreciated, as we've come to the end of our time. And we'll now go to Mr. Johari for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Minister. Indeed, it's good to have you back, and it's good to see you in full health. And thank you for the work you're doing. Minister, in the 2021 budget, TBS received about $227.9 million to implement low carbon fuel program. Can you explain the significance of this investment as well? Are there additional investment in budget 2021 for greening government that you've reviewed, and can you explain the impact on those as well? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Majid, and thank you for your kind words as well, and in fact for everyone's kind words. I didn't expect that you would have noted my absence earlier, but you did, and it's very nice of you to welcome me back. And I'm going to be very pleased to answer that question, Majid, because this is obviously a demonstration of how the economy and the environment go hand to hand, go together. No? En français, on dit main à la main.
In French, hand in hand.
That is demonstrate leadership on the part of the government of Canada. So we're going to do this in several ways, and one way which was announced in budget 2021 is through this $228 million to implement a low carbon fuel program that is going to be necessary as we move towards our 2050 net zero emissions goal. It's going to also be important because it's going to make it possible to achieve low carbon fuel use in federal domestic air and marine fleets. As we do this, we're also going to provide opportunities for businesses across Canada to partner in green supply procurement initiatives. That's going to be excellent news for everyone in Canada because both technologies and economic development opportunities will be there to support that combination of the economy and the environment. And one example of that we are going, one objective that we're going to set is through the procurement of exclusively clean electricity by 2025 for federal use. So then again, Majid, thank you very much, and look forward to working with you and your constituents in making that happen.
Thank you, Minister. Also in the TBS departmental plan, TBS has committed to reducing the greenhouse gas emission by about 40% below the 2005 levels. In your opinion, with all the measures that's put in and you oversee the expenditure, is Canada well in track to achieve this goal? And can you give us some concrete example of how the government will actually accomplish these ambition targets? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Majid. And the answer is yes. The government is on track to reach its emission reduction goals. By the way, we are all mindful that we are at the start of a green revolution, both a green environmental revolution and a green economic revolution. We are going to reach that. By now, we have already, when I say we, it's the federal government has already reduced its emissions by 35% since 2005, and we are confident in reaching a 40% reduction by 2025 and to being net zero carbon emitters by 2050. We're going to do this through how we own and lease real property, how we manage, purchase fleets, business travel, public servant travel. We're going to also work on national safety and security operations to make those operations more green. And finally, as I said earlier, we're going to leverage green procurement chains. Just 2 weeks ago, I spoke to the president of the Council for Environmental Quality at the White House in Washington, DC. As you will know, we have immensely great opportunities to work with the new American administration in integrating our grain supply chains and making not only our environment greener and cleaner quickly, but also more quickly, but also partnering with businesses across the two sides of the frontiers to make that beneficial for businesses looking forward.
Thank you, Minister, for highlighting the initiative and what we are doing as a government and what you're doing as minister overseeing the TBS. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johari, and there goes the bell. I appreciate that, and thank you, Minister, and appreciate you coming back, and thank you for being with us. As many of my colleagues have already expressed, and I want to express on behalf of the committee, our great pleasure to have you back at the committee and chance to see you again, and glad to see that you're well. And so we wish you the best and along those lines. So once again, thank you for attending the meeting today. With that said, we now will go to questioning with the officials who are remaining here for the second hour. The department is just going to add one new member, and I see Mr. Greeno is now on. So I appreciate that. And we will now continue with questionings, and we will go to Mr. Paul Hoos for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Talmott. With respect to payments made, I asked the question to the Minister for anticipated payments. It's saying once there's anticipated payments, we want to be careful if the agreements are not respected. Have you let departments know that there was a risk there? Mr. Elmott.
In terms of our approach throughout the pandemic has been to work with departments, with their CFOs, with communications also to the deputy heads, acknowledging the fact that with the challenges with the pandemic, that money would be going out, and then at times we would have to be more flexible. And as a result, we have been having conversations with them in terms of making sure that the appropriate set of internal controls are there to make sure that post audit verification is done on these programs.
Je demande, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, I'm afraid there was no translation.
Redonnez une minute, s'il vous plaît, puis répétez, parce que j'ai manqué un bout, j'attendais la traduction. Est-ce que Monsieur Hermite peut répéter?
Sorry, I'm not getting any French translation either, so can we just check for the translation, Mr. Clerk?
Oui, oui, merci. Donc, s'il vous plaît, le témoin pourrait répéter dès le début, parce qu'on n'avait rien. Merci.
So, sorry, I still am not getting any translation on my end.
Nor mine.
I have paused your time, Mr. Paul Hoos.
We're not getting it in the room either, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we do not appear to be getting any translation for French or.
Hello, Mr. Chair. This is the clerk. I was hearing translation on the French channel, but I will ask the technicians to look into it if you'll just give me a moment, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will, for the benefit of the technicians, continue speaking so that they can check the translation. Je vais essayer maintenant pour parler, pour s'assurer que la traduction.
I'm going to see now to make sure translation is working. Are we hearing English?
That we try again, Mr. Chair. So if you could please try, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, and thank you, Ms. Paul. And Ms. Paul, Mr. Ermuth, it appears that when you were answering that there wasn't, if you could maybe repeat your answer and we would start from there. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have had conversations both with the CFOs as well as with deputy heads in terms of the fact that we would need to have additional flexibility, and as a result of that, some of the funds and some of the controls that maybe weren't in there at the front would have to be looked at post-audit, looking at it at the end. So in terms of the direct answer to the question is, yes, we have had conversations with departments around making sure that they are looking at and adjusting appropriately their system of internal controls to maintain good stewardship of government funds.
Merci pour la réponse. Mais...
Thank you for that answer. There are businesses that have gotten huge amounts of money for protection equipment, and some have even created companies. a week before getting a contract and got tens of millions of dollars for material because they had contacts in China or elsewhere in the world. So they had agreements that made and they were advanced monies. How did the government ensure that there really was material protection equipment available before giving a contract to a company that wasn't necessarily in the industry beforehand?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. I think the specifics of each contract, the specific of each arrangement, I would have to direct you to the specific department and/or public, PSPC in terms of the specifics around certain of the contracts and what was written into those terms and conditions, and what are the appropriate mechanisms for any follow-up response in terms of recovery of funds or legal action as is allowed under the contract.
OK. Mais justement, quand Approvisionnement Canada faisait...
Well, when PSPC made contractual agreements, they were following the Treasury Board Secretariat's rules. Even though there was an emergency, there were rules that had to be respected when there were tens of millions of dollars, and sometimes it was up to $200 million in contract. This is not a small change. So is there the link between between the Treasury Board Secretariat and the procurement people is were things really strict, saying that you had to follow certain rules? Were things so such an emergency that you went ahead with things, and now they're running after a Montreal business for $90 million, and that there are problems to get the funds back? So there were agreements made by the government, but you, as the Treasury Board Secretariat, you had to do the follow-up because that's your responsibility. Is that not true?
So thank you for the question. Again, the specifics around individual contracts fall under the negotiations with the PSPC in terms of how they would have executed those contracts. It would have followed, as has been noted, it would have followed the procurement policies and whatnot. Acknowledging the fact, of course, that during the pandemic there was a global shortage of certain supplies that would have necessitated changes and some additional flexibilities that PSPC might have requested and/or exercised in purchasing that equipment.
Mais qui? Okay. Je comprends qu'on...
Yes, I understand that there was fast tracking of certain processes, but when we're asked for advances of tens of millions of dollars, for example, with SPAC, was it the minister that had the authority to give an advance, or was it the Treasury Board Secretary that had to approve it?
So depending on the specifics of the contract, there would be times where it would have been delegated to the minister, and there are other times where the minister would have potentially have come in. Again, it depends on the specifics around which specific contracts, and I'm not as familiar with all of the work that the PSPC has been doing.
Mais par exemple, on a eu dans les nouvelles la semaine passée.
For example, we heard in the news last week that there were procedures with Tango Marketing, that there was a company that was unable to deliver the product. So there was an $80 million that was given to that company. Did that go through TBS, or was that PSPC?
So I'm not familiar enough with that specific contract. The specifics of the actual execution of contracts will always go through PSPC. So PSPC would probably be best placed to provide you further details.
Thank you, Mr. Paulhus. We'll now go to Mr. Weiler for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I also like to thank our departmental witnesses for joining our committee today. And just first, to start off, to show some respect to our witnesses, I want to give Mr. Yalkin the opportunity to finish answering the question he was asked earlier on government targets on diversity before he was interrupted.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chair. So just to clarify, The figures that are provided in the departmental plan are the workforce availability figures. So those are calculated to basically determine what is the available workforce that is available when it comes to the 4 employment equity groups that are named in the Employment Equity Act. And the workforce availability, or known as WFA, is calculated based on authorities that are outlined in the Employment Equity Act. And so clearly those benchmarks are intended to be a floor, not a ceiling. So departments are definitely encouraged to achieve them, but also exceed them as the case may be. So the fact that in any given case, one group may exceed what currently the workforce availability is for that group, that by no means reflects the fact that the government is indicating that we should be reducing that representation. We should, I think, celebrate it and continue the important work of trying to increase representation where there are any gaps, and obviously continue to support the diversity of the public service in that vein. So the departmental plan is very clear. It says it doesn't say just the pinpoint target, the percentage. It says at least, and then it provides a percentage, indicating that really that figure is a floor, not a ceiling. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarity. Next question is, what measures has TBS taken this year to be able to improve transparency in financial reporting?
Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Chair, and it's a great question from the member. We have been working very diligently over the past year to improve the transparency of financial reporting. Starting through GC InfoBase, we've been working hard with respect to ensuring that we're building out what we produce for GC InfoBase, and I would say that going forward, that's really going to be our focus, to continue to add to that tool for the benefit of everyone involved. And we'd be willing to always take input from members of this committee, but also any other parliamentary members about how we can continue to improve that. Part of that has to do with thinking through, how we report on people, on results, on funding that's spent, but also we've added a few panes pertaining to COVID, and particularly the authorities that have been secured through Parliament by measure that's mapped back to the same items that were in the economic response plan outlined in the fall 2020 statement. But we've just added onto GC InfoBase as well the COVID expenditures, the estimated expenditures that we've been collecting on a monthly basis from the departments, and including information on open data, which we submitted to the latest report we submitted to the committee yesterday. Beyond that, within the estimates themselves, I think there's been a lot of questions about the reconciliation between what's included in estimates and what's not included in estimates. Things such as, and Mr. McCauley actually touched on it earlier about wage subsidy. That's a tax expenditure, so that's along with EI and so forth, the things that we do not, we do not track through estimates because it's outside the appropriations of departments. It's through tax expenditure reporting that's been done, and has enabling legislation linked to it as well. Through the estimates, making sure that not just reconciling the latest estimates to the budget, but if there's a fall economic statement that comes out with a projection, any policy statement from the government with a projection, being able to ensure that what is the estimates to date, it could be any supplementary estimates compared to what that latest policy document shows, is something that we think is going to be very valuable, and we'll continue to be doing that for the benefit of committees. Including on the COVID side, we've tagged the items that are COVID related If there's things that we're not providing that would be useful for committee members, we're always open and interested in securing that. Thank you.
Kind of along those same lines, as part of Budget 2021, there has been a commitment made to ensure that Crown corporations with less than $1 billion in assets are going to be expected to start reporting on climate-related financial risks. And I'm curious, what role, if any, does TBS have with respect to this matter?
Well,
I apologize, Mr. Purvis, but we're at the end of time, and so and I want to be respectful of that time, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I do need to be respectful of that time, and not only the members but all members' time commitments. So if you can provide us an answer in writing, it would be appreciated.
Happy to.
Thank you. We will now move to to Ms. Vignola for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madame Cahill, earlier I was speaking about the situation. There was a statement of fact from the AFP that needed to be signed in collaboration with the Treasury Board Secretary and the AFP. So what's the situation? Has that statement of fact been signed by the TBS? Well, thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. So as the Minister mentioned, when we came to an agreement in 2020 in October, the clauses within the agreement were agreed upon, and it was signed. So I come back to the agreement. That is the basis of everything in that agreement. The Canada Revenue Agency made decisions with respect to different aspects of the agreement and the payments. Okay. But when you speak to agreement, is that the statement of fact that Mr. Ayward was talking about on Monday? Or is that something that's completely different? And he was mentioned that it had to be signed by the TBS, and it hadn't been done, and that was delaying the decision from the CRA. I'm not trying to making any accusations. I'd just like to understand. Well, thank you very much. That is a very good question. And the terms, as I mentioned, were agreed upon with respect to the statement of fact, as Mr. Ayward was speaking of. To have any new terms, you would have to have the two parties agree in another agreement. But we did have an initial agreement that was agreed upon, and the Public Service Alliance of Canada was aware of the different modes of means of payments, and whether or not those would be taxable before the agreement was signed. Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to look at getting in more information, because we're going to be, I'm trying to get more information, and I think there's some people are still waiting for $40,000, for example. So we'll look into it. Right now, you don't have the child tax benefit, or other benefits aren't included. Why is that? Mr. Purvis? I
missed the translation on.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the translation. So the main estimates does not include the EI or Canada Child Benefit or other insurance programs? Why not?
So the purpose of the estimates is to ensure that parliamentarians have a line of sight on what is being put before them for voting as pertaining the appropriations for the various votes of the departments. And so there's funding that is approved through appropriation acts, through the estimates, and there's funding that is spending authority that's approved separately through statutory legislation. And so EI, Canada Child Benefit, these are all items that are supported under separate statutory legislation and receive their payment authority through separate statutory legislation that are not linked directly to a department.
Okay.
And so that's why we include information on voted spending in the estimates document. That is for decision by parliamentarians. We, for information purposes, include the statutory legislation that's directly linked to that appropriation dependent organization. But beyond that, if there's tax expenditures or if there's statutory funding that is a forecast beyond that, it's typically covered under separate reporting, including EI, including on the tax expenditure report. Yeah.
Merci.
Thank you. Ms. Vignola, you have 3 seconds.
Sur ce, je vous souhaite une...
Well, I simply wanted to say have a lovely evening. Thank you very much for having the patience to answer my questions.
Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Green for 6 minutes.
Thank you. And just picking up on the issue around the 1492 land back, the Mackenzie Meadows claim, I'm wondering, just to give a sense for when you're under these types of court proceedings, does the Treasury Board set aside potentially settlement money just to earmark it in case there's a chance or a likelihood that a settlement were to happen or a judgment were to happen, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Purves?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. There is contingent liabilities that are identified by departments, and those contingent liabilities are recognized and are managed through the Department of Finance. And so we at Treasury Board, if there's a circumstance where there's a payment that is required to exercise and to make a payment to a various group due to a settlement, that would flow through an estimate. So it may be that in a supplementary estimates, Mr. Green, you might see a line item about out-of-court settlements and so forth.
Would you be aware or privy to if there's been set-asides for Indigenous land claims?
Well, ours is more about the execution of decisions taken, funding decisions taken through finance, and so it would really be the department and
I'm sorry, sir. I'm unclear if you've actually answered my question. My question specifically through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Purvis. Would you know if there are set-asides through the Treasury Board on these settlements pursuant to the Department of Finance's policies or reporting mechanisms? It's a direct question through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Purvis. Personal direct question if he would know that or not. Is there a technical problem? Maybe he's on mute. I do hope that my time is retained.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I believe Mr. Purvis may have dropped out of the meeting, unfortunately.
Right. I just was looking and I did not see him there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask it's really unfortunate that it dropped out at that point. I'm going to ask my good friend, is he still here? Is my good friend Yves Duclos here still?
No. The minister is gone as well.
So Mr. Purvis has indicated his computer has gone black. I'm really sorry about that.
That's okay. I won't attribute any malice, although I have seen some expert ducking and dodgings of questions. I will not attribute his blackout screen to that kind of tactic because I know him to not be not be that.
Mr. Green, if you want to continue with your questioning, I had paused you for a brief amount when this happened.
Is there anybody else available to answer that question?
I'm not seeing one, so
I
perhaps
can do this.
Okay.
This is the CFO, Karen Cahill. Thank you for the question. Actually, in the TBS Treasury Board Secretariat contingent liability, there are no provision for land claims, as indicated by Mr. Purvis. The provision would be in the specific department's public accounts in books.
Are you privy to those numbers? Is this something that you would be briefed on?
I am not. I'm only privy to the numbers of for TBS as the CFO, but definitely the specific department could provide these numbers.
So then, would you be privy to how much has been paid out to Indigenous First Nations Métis claims that are already settled? Because I've asked this question before and we didn't have clarity around that.
Again, sir, thanks for the question. Mr. Chair, I am not privy to this information, but we can track the information for the member.
Mr. Chair, I understood it to be the case that up until the point of settlement is Department of Finance, but then after they were settled and to be paid out, the Treasury Board would have an understanding of these numbers. So could Ms. Cahill help me understand why that's not the case?
I am really sorry, Mr. Chair. Again, I see what the TBS pays out. This amount would not be paid by the Treasury Board Secretariat.
Would it be approved by the Treasury Board Secretariat?
I can't answer this question. I'm sorry, I don't have the answer.
Mr. Chair, it's Roger Ermith. So maybe in terms of to respond to Mr. Green's question, in the public accounts at the end of the year, if you and I don't have the specific listing here, there is a summary of all of the claims that have been paid. Again, whenever there would be funding that would go out, there would have to be a source of funds of some sort, whether that was from internal departmental resources or specific to a specific claim or settlement. But the specifics on each individual one, I don't have that information myself.
So if the public sector service was being sued for $1 billion by the Black class action lawsuit, would the Treasury Board know if there was a set aside on that contingent liability?
So whether or not so the Treasury Board would be aware of the fact that there would be a legal discussion going on or a legal suit going on, working with the Department of Justice. And again, I'm not speaking to any specific suit. There would then be discussions around setting up contingent liabilities as per public sector accounting standards.
So what is the contingent liability for the Treasury Board on lawsuit settlements currently? Would it be in this main estimate?
No, you will find the question. You will find the contingent liability in our public account as per Mr. Ermith. So each department will report on their contingent liability, and it will also be depending on the likeliness of the settlement.
But if the entire government,
Mr. Green.
Oh.
Thank you, Ms. Cahill.
Please give my best, if I could, just as a point of privilege, please give my best to Mr. Purves and let him know that he was dearly missed in my round of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Green. And perhaps through Ms. Cahill or through Mr. Ermith, as the question was put to Mr. Purves before we lost him, that perhaps he might be able to provide a written answer to the committee. It would be appreciated if you can forward that to him. Thank you. We will now go to the second round and to Mr. McCauley for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And to the witnesses, I've got, I want to get to the departmental results, but before I do, I've got some more questions on the Treasury Board process. Maybe I can just give them to you and you can get back to us, because I suspect it'd be kind of lengthy answers. I'd like to know what COVID measures did the Treasury Board review, what went through the process, as I was asking about the wage subsidy, what COVID measures got exemptions from policy, and as well as how many exemptions from policies were granted in the last 12 months. So if you could get back to the committee on that, I'd appreciate it. From the departmental results, a few things. One, I'm looking at the departmental result indicator for percentage of access information requests responded within legislated timelines. Now, we've often this committee have discussed the raging dump fire that is our ATIP system right now. I'm looking, it was 79% in 2019-2020. Target for this current year is 85%. So the question is, why would we not have it set at 100% when it's a legislative timelines? Again, these are not wishes to have ATIPs returned on a certain time. These are legislative timelines. Why would we not have it as 100% as a bare minimum, as the only possible goal?
Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Chair. So we've set the targets based on reasonable expectations in terms of.
Okay, can I just interrupt right there? How is not recognizing the law or obeying the law a reasonable expectation? It's a legislative guideline. It's not legislative wishes. It's not legislative, well, get around to whenever. These are legislative guidelines. And I realize that it may not be achievable, but should we not be having our goals set to recognize legislative timelines?
So the performance standard that we expect from departments is that they are meeting the legislated timelines at least 90% of the time. That's our performance target. Of course, we would always strive and we encourage departments to meet the legislated timelines 100% of the time to the best of their ability. There is a significant proportion of departments who actually do respond to all of their ATI requests, approximately 84 departments, I think, in the last year, that met their timelines at least 90% of the time.
Would maybe your department submit to the committee what actions TBS is taking about the laggards? If 84% are meeting the legislative timelines, what are we doing about the ones that aren't? I want to move on. It's on the same page. Percentage of departments that maintain and manage their assets over their life cycle. Now, it was 73% last year. For some reason, we're dropping to a goal of 60%. So in the departmental plan, it states about 11 departments make up the majority of the assets that have to be maintained. And I don't expect an answer right now, but you can get back to us on this one, is what is the value of those assets that you've stated 11 departments make up the majority? What is the value of the assets? And these are assets owned by the Canadian taxpayer. Why is it that the government is setting a goal of just 60% of these valuable assets to be maintained? I would think if it's billions of dollars worth of assets, again, respecting taxpayers' rights or respecting our taxpayers, that we would have goals set at, if not 100, at least an increase over last year's results. But instead, our goal is at least 60%. And I'll be honest, I do not accept this argument of it's a floor. The Treasury Board framework lays out very clearly that the purpose of the departmental plans, that it states priorities and purposes. The departmental plans aren't where you put in minimal expectations. It's your priorities. The government's prioritizing 40% of departments not to maintain or manage taxpayers' own assets. Why? Okay, maybe get back to us.
It's Roger. Okay.
Okay. I'm looking at the departmental plans and the Treasury Board departmental results, and they've stated achieving 71% of their targets. Percentage of departmental results indicators of which targets are achieved. 71% last year, 71% this year. When I go to Open Canada, the website, it actually shows 38.7% achieved. Why the discrepancy between what's tabled in the House of Commons to Parliament and actual numbers on the website? There were 75 indicators. The website said 38% achieved, and yet the departmental plan and the DRR both show 71%.
And what?
And again, maybe get back to us.
Okay. Thank you.
Good Lord.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. If we can get an answer back to committee, it'd be appreciated. We'll now go to Mr. Drouin for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses that we have before us today. I have a question. Of course, you're aware that the white paper that was published by the official languages, whether it was the Canadian Federation, the Acadian Francophone Association, asked that the central agency had a greater responsibility for the Official Languages Act so that it could be strengthened, this act. Is anybody amongst you, I don't know who amongst you might be able to explain how does the TBS, how can they give the Modernization of Official Languages Act a bit more strength? Yes, well, thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. So this is the vision that was announced by the government with Madame Jolie's paper that identified changements that are being proposed by the government for the modernization. So there are many different proposals there. And one thing that I would like to note is the proposal of increasing the responsibilities of the Treasury Board as a federal institution so that compliance of all of the federal agencies and institutions be ensured, and the obligations that are now recommended that they become mandatory for the Treasury Board, and that they would have a power to surveil that. Well, thank you very much. I would like to come back to the question of legislative expenditures, and I think in English it's statutory votes. So I don't know if that's what my colleague was saying earlier, but because we have looked at the emergency wage subsidy and that there weren't enough controls, and I know that EI is involved with that, but there were audits that were done by the department. So could you explain just how the process goes for this with respect to the appropriations? Mr. Chair, maybe we could respond in writing to that question. Oh, I think Mr. Greenham would be able to answer that.
Detail that Glenn could have provided. So in terms of what's in the estimates and what's not in the estimates, as Glenn explained, voted authorities are what's in the Appropriation Act that the estimate supports. That's the key piece. In addition, for information, statutory items that are tied directly to a department are also included in the estimates on a for information basis to provide a more complete picture. But in terms of tax measures, they're not tied to a specific department. They're under the Income Tax Act, and they're reported separately in the tax expenditures report. The majority of tax expenditures are revenue changes, for example, tax credits that lower revenue, but there are some that are reported in the public accounts as expenditures, and these are also reported in the tax expenditures report, not through the estimates. So that's the main dichotomy, because the EI and the tax expenditures aren't tied to a particular department and they're reported elsewhere, but the statutory and voted spending tied to departments is reported through the estimates.
D'accord, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to bring up the point that, yes, for the wage subsidy, there was an application process, but it wasn't because an organization made a request that they would be qualified and that the government will simply say, yes, we believe you. There were measures that Revenue Canada put in place, and if I look on their website, yes, this is taxable income, and there are verifications that go with it with the agency after the fact, even if they have received these wage subsidies. So I just wanted to thank you lastly.
Mr. Drouin, we will now go to Ms. Vignola for 2.5 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you. My question is one, I'm simply curious. I hope that you'll be able to answer, but I was saying that there was $104 million for leadership, for administration. So I come from education sector. So when we think about leadership and administration, that would be, you would think that you're wanting to move ahead with educational type activities. But for the government, what does that exactly mean, administrative leadership? Why $140 million for that department? Well, thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. First of all, administrative leadership, it brings together several of our programs. In fact, it involves many different applications of programs that are government-wide programs. An example would be the Office of Accessibility in public service that would come under that area. Also for digital services, and so that comes also under administrative leadership. So this is a number of programs that are grouped together where there will be services that are government-wide, and so for all different departments. Thank you. Thank you very much. That is very clear. It's nice to get a clear answer. A question. You know, the access to information is important, not simply for MPs, but for journalists and for the general population. And so the commissioner, information commissioner said that the access system was in a critical situation, and maybe was they would be unable to repair it. So what can the TBS do to help improve the situation, and when will it be improved for the users?
And we value very much the information commissioner's input and her views in terms of the performance of the access to information system, and recognize the pressure that the system has been under over the past number of years. So TBS has been working directly with institutions to identify strategies to improve their access to information performance, both in response to COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. This includes many of the areas that the commissioner has noted in her submission. Included in this, we've been issuing guidance to support institutions. We've been working with them to ensure that they are aware of best practices, that they have the tools that they need to be able to deliver access to information requests electronically during COVID. We've also, in terms of other initiatives beyond kind of the COVID-19 response, we have undertaken a procurement exercise for request processing software, which is nearing completion, hopefully over the course of the next couple of months this spring, which will help enable improve departments' internal processing for their software. And we continue. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, thank you. I hate to interrupt you there, Ms. Reid, but
no problem.
I was hoping we'd get a just quick end, but appreciate if you have anything further to add, please do. And I do see Mr. Purvis is back, so hopefully he's be able to communicate in some way, should that be a need. I will now go to Mr. Green for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I tend to stay on topic, and now that we have Mr. Purvis back, I had a question to Mr. Purvis. His staff had answered it in ways that I think were adequate for his staff, but I can't help but just let go of the fact that the Treasury Board is not consulted on contingent liabilities. And so I'll put the question one more time and allow Mr. Purvis to go on the record and describe the process to those that might be tuned in. Is he aware of, or is the Treasury Board, is he in the Treasury Board in his capacity consulted on contingent liabilities as it relates to Indigenous land claims? And I will throw in there the Black class action lawsuit.
Thank you. And I realize Ms. Purvis is on using an iPad and buds, but hopefully he can answer that question. And if you would speak slowly and clearly, it would be greatly appreciated. You're on mute, Mr. Purvis.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to intervene. I believe Mr. Purvis is still having some issues with his sound. It may be worthwhile perhaps to come back to him after we had a chance. Our technicians are still working with him. He was back, but I think his sound is still giving some problems.
So maybe what I will do, notwithstanding the fact we're going to have answered, his staff have picked up this question, I'll borrow a line from our good chair, maybe ask through you if he could provide it in writing. His direct statement from the Deputy Minister on whether or not the Treasury Board is consulted on contingent liabilities. Mr. Chair, by way of comment, I'll just share with you that it's disconcerting for me that significant potential outstanding liabilities don't seem to have like a place that is front and center in the minds of the Treasury Board. And I thought, maybe wrongly so, but my understanding from this committee, from public accounts, was that the Treasury Board ultimately had, at least some kind of cursory process obligation for approval and would have some kind of high-level understanding of what's coming and going out of all the departments. I'm hearing today that that might not be the case in a practical way as it relates to the questions I'm asking. So maybe I'll get that in writing at a future date.
Thank you, Mr. Green, and thank you. We will now go to Ms. Harder for 5 minutes. Ms. Harder, if you could lower your boom so that we can maybe hear you. Thank you.
Sure, that is such a good idea. Thank you so much. Okay, just coming back here to Mr. Yelkin. I thank you for explaining the departmental plans. Of course, I understand the nature of them. They are to set priorities, they are to set strategic outcomes, to set programs, and to set expected results covering the next 3 years. That's the description that accompanies them anyways. So thank you, I'm aware. But when we talk about goal setting, we shouldn't be talking about setting a goal that puts us behind from the year in which we're setting them. Goals should be about making things better. So you talked about a goal being the floor and then trying to exceed that. I understand, which is why I'm confused as to why your numbers, the numbers in the department for those who belong to a minority group and those who are women, they were actually decently high in 2019 and 20. For minority groups, it was 11.5%. For women, it was 51.1%. But then the targets that were set for the next year were actually lower than where they were at. And then lower yet. Like the benchmark continues to be dropped rather than heightened, rather than set higher. I'm confused by that.
So thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to, I think, speak a little bit about it, given the fact also that I'll say benchmarks are amongst the President's 5 priorities on diversity and inclusion, including revisiting them as part of that work. So the benchmarks that exist, what I mentioned before, workforce availability, legislatively prescribed benchmarks, are the minimum that departments should be aiming for. So the floor that they should be aiming for, ensuring that their workforce represents the available labor in the market. And so, as is indicated in the departmental plan, this is not a ceiling at all, as by the denotation at least. But as part of the process of reviewing these benchmarks, we will be considering, for example, would it make sense to consider an alternative that perhaps results in higher benchmarks being set? So that's something that's currently that we're currently working on and considering as part of our work on D&I.
I guess what I don't understand is, why is the goal to have a lesser percentage than where you are currently at?
Thank you again for the question, Mr. Chair. The goal is not to have a lesser percentage of where we're currently at. The goal is always, as is the case with many of the departmental results that one will find in the departmental plan, the goal is always continuous improvement. So even in circumstances where,
but a term, sorry, excuse me, I'm just gonna clarify here. Like, so the term benchmark was used, the term continuous improvement was used, but the goal that I'm reading here, like I have the chart right in front of me, is not actually that the percentage would be increased, but rather that the percentage would be decreased from where it's currently at.
So, Mr. Chair, I don't have the report directly in front of me, but I can see the table in my mind's eye. And I do recall that when it speaks to the target on the page itself, it says at least and then the percentage. So what that indicates is that the goal isn't to lower, for example, the representation to that rate. It's really to at least achieve that level of representation, and wherever possible, of course, exceed it.
Okay, but again, the number is coming down. It's moving down in a downward direction. In other words, fewer numbers who are members of a minority group, and fewer numbers who are women. Like, it's moving down. Like if I write a math exam and I get 71%, my goal next time is not going to be, gee, I think I'll set the benchmark at 65%. No, my benchmark is going to be 85%. Like, in what world does it make sense for the department to set its benchmark lower than where it's currently at?
The benchmark,
I don't actually need
Chair,
the document described. I just want to understand the philosophy behind it.
Yeah, the benchmark is actually calculated based on the data that is available on labor force availability. So essentially, there are adjustments that are made, like technical adjustments, to calculate, not just determine willy-nilly, for example, what do we think a good percentage is, but to calculate exactly, or as exact as possible, what the available workforce is for the 4 EE groups that departments have at their disposal. So it's not in a sense a goal that is set arbitrarily by Treasury Board Secretariat or by the President of Treasury Board or by Treasury Board. It's a goal that is established under it is a benchmark that is established under authorities and legislation, and it is calculated using a set formula.
Thank you, Mr. Yelkin and Ms. Harder. We'll now go to Mr. McKinnon for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And for everyone's information, I'm the last questioner, so I'll even try and perhaps yield some time back. I know it's been a long day for everyone. I am struck, and I, I've been listening intently to the back and forth today. I'm not sure that those who are watching the committee today will be particularly enlightened with respect to the government's commitment for diversity by this previous line of questioning about benchmarks, but which are called benchmarks, but are in fact targets, and so on. And I do want to applaud the officials before us, and of course the government that I'm a part of, for its commitment to diversity in the public service. And that's an ongoing commitment, and I know it's one that all of you take very seriously. I won't ask you to explain any further, Mr. Yelkin, but I do want to point out that this very sterile debate that we just had is not a reflection at all of the significant progress that has been made with respect to diversity in the public service. So I want to thank you for that. I do want to speak, though, about collective bargaining. I recall specifically when this government took office in 2015, we were way behind on collective bargaining with public servants, and had to catch up very quickly. And then a second round was accomplished in rather speedy fashion, if I do say so myself, in 2018. Can one of you, I'm not sure who, maybe perhaps it's you, Mr. Yelkin, just outline for us the collective bargaining schedule that lies ahead and how the government's looking and planning to that?
Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I apologize. I'm by no means an expert when it comes to collective bargaining, and I'm really representing the expertise of my colleagues in the Office of the Chief Human Resources Officer on this. But I do understand that notice has been given to collective bargain, and that plans are well on foot to begin that process this summer. And that my colleagues are very much looking forward to that opportunity.
So how much time, roughly? Again, we're not looking for the government's negotiating strategy, but you know, what kind of timetable are we looking at? What are the sort of priority groups and so on?
It's very hard to say in terms of timeline. The nature of negotiations is something that doesn't lend itself well to sort of precise timelines. But as I mentioned, what I do know and what I can say is that negotiations are planned to begin this summer, and that they will, I have no doubt, continue into the fall. But would be happy to also come back to the committee with further precisions should those be available, to provide more details on that.
That's very good. I appreciate it. And Mr. Chair, that's all I have for today.
Thank you, Mr. McKinnon, and appreciate that. And so with that said, as he indicated, that he was the last questioner. And so I'd like to thank Mr. Irmuth, Ms. Cahill, Mr. Purvis. I can sort of see you a bit right now, but unfortunately we lost you for a lot of it. Ms. Reid, Mr. Yelkin, and Mr. Greeno for coming and continuing to come to committee and presentation and answering our questions where you can. So as we've indicated before, where there were questions asked that you could provide further information in writing, it would be greatly appreciated if you provide that to the clerk so that it can be distributed to the committee. And with that said, I want to thank everyone. It's been a long day, and I wish you an all good evening, and I adjourn the meeting.